the charge.
Yeah, it has been. It has been a couple of weeks, and a lot has happened in that period of time. I think we really spoke a lot about strides for sustainability last time, and we were preparing for the Toronto Marathon, which we ran on the 7th. And what a run it was, hey?
Man, it was crazy. It was beautiful. I think it was more. It was weird. It was a weird run. We were
It was a weird run
with the guys earlier, but
It was a weird run.
like it was. I think it was not what we expected. I don't know how your thoughts were on it, but it wasn't what I expected, but in a good way, which is kind of interesting.
Man, these runs are always so emotional, and emotions are something kind of hard to quantify, right? Unless you really know your own emotions. And I'm in the process, and I'm at a stage in my life where I had to forget about my emotions, right? We focus so much on the business, and we had to be so precise and almost like cold to our feelings. And the marathons were that one part of the year where our emotions are allowed to show up. And it's funny, right? Because we do it for a period of 3 to 4 hours. And we deal with everything in that one race. Mm-hmm. So I found this year going into it, yeah, it was emotional from a broad spectrum of like joy and elation, whatever the heck you want to call it. But in a general sense, the marathon itself was an odd one. Like, it was definitely more unusual than the other ones that we've previously done. But that's where it was weird for me. There was also some funny things that happened throughout the race. But what were you getting to when you mentioned that it was an odd one?
Yeah, I think it was just like the side of the emotion side of things, I think, didn't come out at all. One of the things I know we talked about afterwards was like that one of the biggest moments for me was that Aaron crossed the finish line.
Yeah.
And like seeing his excitement, like he actually had rain, which sucked. Like we skipped that part, but
yeah, we just sat in the rain waiting, eating protein bars right in the finish line.
So that part was different because normally the last 4, it's literally been like what is that emotion that you feel when you cross the line and you've conquered something, right? In the last 10K or whatever. So one of the things, just to fill people in on usually how it works for us at least, is that in the last 10Ks when like you battle things that you're dealing with, right? And I think this time we chatted about this afterwards, is that it was like 10K of like the mind was free, which is such a weird feeling.
So crazy. It was
yeah,
so crazy.
I was telling Jared before, like I put my headphones in just to put my headphones in. Like I didn't need them. Where the last races, I was like, oh, I need them for the last 10K to like get me through it, and I just threw them in because I think it was like a habit, and I was like, I just want to have them in. But no, the feeling overall was it showed a path of like that. It's actually not easy, but I think the path to doing it in 3 hours is there. Like I can see it. I broke a barrier of 3:30, which is something that was, I think, a barrier in my mind that I was like, if I break this, then I can see the path to like doing it quicker.
Yeah.
That was really good. Yeah, it was just a nice, simple race, which is super weird to say out loud because it's a 42-kilometer race.
It was kind of.
Yeah, it was interesting.
I feel like next year we're gonna regret these words. It was easy.
Yeah.
It was easy, and just to share, what was your final time? We haven't got the official ones yet. I checked the website again this morning, but.
Yeah, but I think I was saying to Jared, I think that because it's unorganized. So Toronto Marathon, if you're listening to this, very unorganized.
Come on, guys. It was terrible.
I think that
terrible.
It being unorganized is that I actually think that they don't have the data directly for you. So because they haven't uploaded it, which is super weird. So I think that it just goes off gun time. So I think it tracks your, like when obviously the gun shot, which is at the beginning, which depending on when you start, unless you're the leader of the race, you're not going to be at the gun time, right?
No.
So, but overall, the time that I'm going with is my watch, which is 3:23. So 7 minutes faster than what I wanted to do it at. So
yeah, and I was 3:41, which, I think how much faster is that than your last PR?
3:36. So it's 13 minutes.
Yeah, and I improved by 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no injuries this year, and I think that was the biggest thing for me. Every single year, it was coming in motorcycle accident, spinal injury, whatever the heck it was. There was something. This year was the first year where I didn't come into it with anything else other than actual pure preparation. Mm-hmm. Do I think I could have done better during the preparation stage? Yeah, I think I already found areas of improvement. And then the post-marathon aspect of things was pretty interesting. But before we get into that, can you just walk me through your marathon experience? Now that you've been out of it for about 2 weeks, walk us through the start line to the finish line. Like, what did you actually experience?
That's a hard question. I was trying to recap this on, when was this, last week? I Yeah, last week. Start to finish. So I think starting the race, so just to give a bit of insight, so I was trying to do something, what's it called when you do the 10-10-10? What's the actual technique?
Reverse split.
Yeah, so I was trying to do a reverse split. So pretty much you do your first 10 miles slower than your marathon pace, you do your next 10 miles at marathon pace, and then you do your last 10 kilometers faster than your marathon pace. Now, that was the mindset I went into it with. That's how I did Edmonton. I was able to get the PR there. Once I started running and I was 5K in, it was about 5K, I realized that like I didn't want to do that because I was just putting on a good pace. And I realized that my body and the training, and I think just being more dialed into the training, it allowed me that I didn't have to do that. So I actually started setting it at around 5 minutes was where I wanted to be for the first little while. So I was running in that side of things when it came to the time, so about 5 minutes per kilometer. And then the mindset, like the way I was thinking about it, it was just, again, I didn't have thoughts in my mind that were like, it just wasn't like the other years. There wasn't things where I was like, oh, my legs hurt or like my arms hurt or whatever it is hurts. Like I just went through the race. It was a beautiful day. We got like super lucky.
Super lucky, yeah.
It was maybe 14, 15 degrees. By the end, you maybe got into the high, maybe like 17, 18 by the finish line. But like,
and it was overcast. You were only getting hit by sun for 10K.
yeah.
In that 10K, I gained 10 shades, but yeah.
Oh, I have 10, yeah. So like, so I think that was the weird part about it was then you're going through the different stages and you get to a point where like you're running through, there's the tree section, you're doing some downhill. I was amazed by there was more downhill than I thought.
There was a lot of unexpected uphill too.
Which the downhill, some of it was, there was one that was too steep, which is kind of not ideal.
Which part was that?
Actually, sorry, two. So there was the one at the beginning, like kilometer 6 or 7, that was fairly like,
oh yeah,
and then it went up, which that one was fun because that was hilarious to watch because there's a huge group, right?
Yeah, so when you start going up the first big hill, losing, like I lost half my pack, and it was my pack. You typically at the start of marathon started, just to give you guys a frame of reference, and I hope a good chunk of you actually end up running one. It's an absolutely amazing experience. It starts off at a start line, and what Kai was talking about with gun time is that if you start right at the start line and the gun goes off, your time will be accurate. We were all the way back here, maybe like 400 people back. So by the time we got to the start line, it was like 5 minutes later. Yeah. So that's where the inaccuracy comes from. But that pack, that thickness, almost takes 5 kilometers to break away.
At least.
And we were running on sidewalks. I almost ran into old people, jumping over bus benches just to keep my pace. I was like, oh man, and just meandering through, right? Yeah. But when you get to that first big hill, let's say there's 500 people that you're running with, it goes down to like 25. Mm-hmm. It's nuts. You see all these people just shedding off, and we're wondering, and I'm sure you wonder this, it's like, are these people regretting this? We're only like a minute into this marathon and they've already stopped.
Yeah,
they already started walking, right? So anyways, back to your story. You said that hill was probably one of the first points, right?
Yeah, so I think the part that I don't like is the downhill, like that extreme. It's hard to just plant your feet because you get into this awkward motion that's out of stride.
Where you're leaning back and you're wearing crazy shoes too, so they're not made for that.
Yeah, so that wasn't ideal. But then other than that, you get through the different paces. And then I think I was trying to explain to Jared one of the neighborhoods we ran through. Crazy neighborhood just for like, I think you get a little bit of motivation for 2 kilometers because there's like millions of dollars of cars parked in the driveways, like beautiful vehicles and nice houses.
Yeah.
And then honestly, like I really don't remember. I remember getting to the half marathon time because there's that bridge with all those people yelling.
Oh, that was such a cool moment.
Yeah, so that was super cool. So there's like this really loud, pretty much you're running on your bridge and obviously the
probably
sound
like
is
75
amplified.
or 100 people.
Oh, at least from a
with
company.
Like noise machines and it amplified because of the bridge, right?
Yeah, so that part was cool. And then after that, I think you kind of just get into the running along the water right near the end. And you do the whole like going out and coming back along the water. That probably the biggest highlight for me. Yeah. And now looking back at this more is there's about 5 or 6 kilometers left. I was running a crazy pace. I was running like a 4:45 with this guy beside me. And I could see the CN Tower and like the beautiful water. I was trying to get a picture, but it was super awkward when you're running. Yeah. And I think that was like the moment where I just realized like, okay, whatever time I put down at this marathon, and again, like whatever the pace was at that point, I was like, I know I can get under 3 hours. And that was like the clicking point for me.
Yeah.
And like I said, I put in my headphones a little bit before that, but I was literally just like, I don't even know what songs I was listening to. Like, I can't even remember that. Where normally in the other marathons, I'd be like, okay, I remember listening to like, I don't know, Many Men by 50 Cent for this part, right? Like,
jam,
stupid stuff like that, right? Like, there's certain songs that you know, but no, this one I can't even tell you the last songs. Oh, actually, no. The one I put on was, I'll shout out to Ethan here. He put what's it called?
Run.
By Rufus Du Sol, and that was a crazy song. So
That's
a nice one just to like.
That song is so dangerous.
It's such a fun song to finish with.
Yeah, but it makes you run too fast.
Yeah, which is nice. It lasts like 500 meters.
I go into Kai and I have a lot of stupid nicknames for each other. My nickname this year was, there's Iliad Kipchoge. We call him Kip Gershi. We call me Kip Gershi this year. And that guy's the fastest marathon runner in the world. So in my head, I kept on yelling Kip Gershi. I was like, let's go. And I'll explain my piece now. So it's interesting that, you started from the start line. My realizations happened the day after. So I think there was a significant difference, noticeable difference in my post-marathon capabilities as a human being. So walking, it's like I hadn't ran. It was actually kind of messed up. We were talking about it for a while. Aaron, I think what he said, he couldn't really walk downstairs. Every time he came to a staircase, he would stop and he'd go like this. Like, oh no, what have I done? And it was really fun to watch because we've been there. And then you were a lot better too.
Oh, yeah,
but
way better,
you did some pretty bad damage, I think, to your feet. Like
just toes.
Yeah, they're kind of mangled. But for me, I was actually debating. I was like, what the heck did I do? Why didn't I run faster? Like, I feel like I didn't run. And my time was, like I said, it was 3:41. I'm pretty sure I could have shaved 20, 25 minutes off of that. Now I see the path to sub 3 very clearly as well. It's going to take a lot of work because those are the fine-tuning pieces that need to be really dialed in. And I'll probably have to extend my training out. But that's where I'm starting, is that after the marathon, I didn't feel anywhere near the same amount of pain that I did. I went as far as running the next day. So some of you guys follow me on Instagram. I went home the next day with Kai and Aaron. We basically ran the marathon, went out for the first drink we've had in a long time. We thought we were gonna, have a little bit of fun. We pretty much just got a beer in. That was really it, and then kind of tapped out. And then following that, we rested, got up, went and relaxed for the day, and then got back into Calgary like 7 p.m.-ish.
Something like that,
Yeah, and the first thing I did once I got home and kind of settled my responsibilities, I threw a pair of shoes on and I ran. And I ended up setting another PR, fastest kilometer. So I had to do that because I wanted to prove to myself that my training was actually sustainable. Now this is where the piece comes into play, where I think I've reached the understanding of what the marathon this year was. This is our 5th marathon that we just completed, right? And I think it was a really strong representation of what we've experienced in business so far. That so many years have been painful, and then all of a sudden, 1 year it didn't feel that bad. And it was because of all the pain and suffering that we experienced during that time. We reflected back upon it, we owned it in the moment, and then we acted on the pain that we experienced in order to ensure that the next year wouldn't be as painful. So we've had 4 years of critical knowledge applied to this equation that we're trying to satisfy, which is marathon times and so on and so forth. And that's what we walked into this 5th marathon, is all that knowledge gained through pain with a goal of executing a goal, which we did satisfy. And that was the biggest takeaway for me, because that moment of peace that we had during the marathon, where it was like 10 kilometers, where my mind was empty, it was truly empty. Like, there was no thoughts going through. It was absolute silence. And I felt like I just really achieved like peace. But then when I got closer to the finish line wraps up around a hill and then goes across a bridge. For one moment, I got super emotional. I was looking at my watch and I was like, there's no way this is the time. This is 40 minutes faster than my last marathon. How the hell did I get here this quickly? I feel like I saw you pretty, throughout. So it was so interesting to feel that moment. And I felt like the idea of tears welling up in my eyes, but they never really happened. The emotion was there, but I was so in control of everything that was going on during that 3-ish hours that for some reason I just felt unfazed. And I feel like we've slowly gotten to that position in business as well too, right? And I think it's all because it started off with a pure moment. And it's led us to where we are today, which is probably a good segue to talk about our moms, right? Like, yesterday was Mother's Day, and I want to make sure that we acknowledge our dads. Like, we love our dads. Like, they're amazing guys. They've set the standard so high for us in regards to what their version of a father and a man looked like in that generation. And then we're now trying to take the best of what they gave us and apply it to this generation and the next generation. We've loosely called ourselves the middle children, right? We're the guys that are stuck between 2 generations, our parents' generation and the next generation. And we have to serve both of those at the same time to ensure that we are being balanced with our approach so that we can speak to both sides to bridge that gap together, right? So this really all starts from our moms though, right? And what does your mom mean to you? Like, how does she tie into everything that we just spoke about and the direction that we're heading in as a company?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of things. I think, let me think here. Where to start? Yeah, I think Mother's Day is always an interesting one because it's one of those aspects where like it's like I don't need to celebrate my mom on one day of the year, right? Like I think I appreciate her 365 days of the year,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think for me, like before we get into the depths of like the background with my mom, but it's cool that you can see like I didn't get to see my mom yesterday, so my parents live in BC. But I was able to interact with her and actually saw her like 2 days before that 'cause she was helping my sister out in Calgary. And I can just see like that she's at peace, which is funny because you're talking about the marathon and like we get to these points and like these different stages within the business. But seeing your parents get to that stage and especially your mom where like the things that she's done for you, I think is way cooler. She's literally telling me about how she went to some like show where they've like explained how to farm without pesticides, and that's what she did on Mother's Day. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what is going on here that's what she was doing? But it's just cool because you get to see that she's at peace with what she's doing, and I think that's a big thing for us as like their sons. I think that's when you start to realize that your mom, it's not even that they're like proud of you, but it's like you've done something where they feel like they can now live their life how they want. So like before I get into the depths, like what's your take on that? Like the Mother's Day for you, because the other part for you is like you obviously have kids, right? So your wife is a mom.
Yeah.
So how does that tie into the aspect of the relationship with your mom and now obviously having kids that have that same impact from your wife?
It's a good question. And I think here's the reality of my fortunate position in life. I was able to say Happy Mother's Day to my sisters, my mother-in-law, my mom, and then grandma number 3, which is just as important as the first 2. It's like my one of my in-laws' mothers, because she lives here in Calgary. She's the only relative, other than like maybe a cousin or 2 here, that I have in Calgary. So she's my closest connection to that role, and she plays a vital role in my children's life. So I was able to say it to a lot of people. And there's people in my life that don't have human children, but they have like animals and whatever, right? And realistically, that counts too. Is as soon as a person decides to take a position out of their day to be able to support the life of another being, they're functioning as a mother if they're being nurturing in that relationship, right? So I think that was a major takeaway for me this year, is that I have really key individuals in my life that don't have human children that they're responsible for, but they still play a motherly role. So that was like a really cool epiphany that I had this Mother's Day. But in relation to seeing it across the board, I don't want to negate anybody's importance, but my mom is my only mom. And she gets all my energy on this day. Do I do the piece where I set up the framework that I make sure that, you know, my wife's day is super, you know, happy and the children, she really gets to focus on the children? 100%. Like I was the cameraman and the organizer for the entire day's worth of events to ensure that Janet was able to really feel like the love and joy that we've been able to bring into this world together. But at my heart, it was purely about my mom in that moment. And I think it's because what she did for me and the sacrifices that she made allowed me to be able to have the opportunity to have epiphanies like this, to have conversations like this, to also even love your mother, right? Like the way that our parents treat each other is pretty crazy. Like you can't really see where the relationship connects and disconnect. Like my parents look at you as their son, and I'm sure it's the same way the other way around. It kind of goes unspoken, right? So I think that's where the tie-in point for me, man, is like, there's just something that, what do they always end up saying is like, your mother is the first love of your life and your daughter is the last love of your life. And I also have that too, right? Like I have a 5-year-old girl, and I always make sure to the best of my ability, and I'm not perfect by any means, is the way that I show up as a father and a husband will be a direct representation of who she looks for in a spouse. Now I can't mold that based on my hopes and dreams, even though, you know, we have Uncle Kai, we've probably watched too many gangster movies and we have this perception of how he actually wants her first boyfriend to be greeted. So that's a different conversation. But realistically, I think that's where all of this kind of comes together. Is Mother's Day is that one moment of the year that I agree with you. I love my mom every day of the year. But that's that one moment in the year where you get to stop and think about it, and you really dial in the value of who that person is to you. And mothers come in all forms, right? They come in the versions that we have, which are like the best, the best. Any meal I want, anytime. Iron my clothes, like whatever, just pampered all the way through. But simultaneously push so much responsibility on us that we learned how to be good human beings. And then there's mothers that are terrible and don't know what they're supposed to do with their children and stumble through the process and have anxiety and they don't know what it is because the responsibility is so big, but they're still mothers too, and we still need mothers like that as well too. I think ultimately there's no wrong way of doing it, there's just different versions of it, and every single version counts.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so many aspects to it. Yeah, like I obviously don't have kids, so the parenthood side, like being a parent, I don't know. But
that's pretty awesome.
I think I think you can just see, it's hard to like reflect on the mother side of things. So like to go back to your question before, you really, you don't take the time. So yesterday, it's funny, I had an appointment downtown, so I was like driving, and that's when it kind of hit me with what you were saying, like the sacrifices and being able to enjoy the life here. And it really makes you realize that like just being grateful in that moment for the things that you have today because of, again, both parents. It's not just moms, but at the same time, it's just a day that you can see, okay, well, what did your mom do for you in those moments to be able to have a life where we live in Calgary and it's pretty freaking amazing. Like it's an amazing city and you're just, like you're grateful for that. But I don't know, the relationship with my mom is, it's interesting because I think it's like they're going to be your biggest fan, but they also potentially can be your biggest critic in a good way.
Yeah, both our moms are the same on that side.
Which is,
oh man.
Which is funny because I think with age, they almost become more blunt and it's absolutely priceless. Like, this is a total like just story to share, but I renovated my bathroom and I put a sink in and my mom sees my bathroom for the first time like a week ago. First thing she says is, oh, this is super hard to clean. Like you're gonna have a hard time cleaning this type of sink and stuff. And I'm like, sweet, the bathroom's nice though, right? Like that's the first thing she comments. So it's just funny because like with age, I feel like they just get more blunt about stuff. Like I'm like,
tell me I'm wrong about this. I think our moms are the only people that know how to get underneath our skin still consistently. Every time.
I think she's not like, trying to, but it's just so funny. But again,
it's because we care so much about what they think, right? Like their words actually have the most weight. Like things my mom says to me still carries more weight than almost anybody else. Dads too, but like I think our dads have kind of just been like, hey, these guys are actually all right, right? Like we're friends now. I think that's kind of the relationships that we've morphed into with our dads, or we're just buddies. You know, like
that's just a joke,
let's talk about soccer, F1, or like whatever stuff. But the moms are still the moms, and I think that's a function of the beauty of being a mother, but also the burden is that you never stop worrying. They never stop worrying. And we're in this a level of awareness that we could potentially be the individuals that, allow them to not have to worry anymore. And maybe that's what you were talking about, where you feel like your mom.
I think that is where now I see the interactions. I feel like the worry's not that much anymore. Like she'll make comments and stuff, but I'm like, the life aspect of it, I don't think she's worried. Like again, if she listens to this, maybe she's gonna say different. But I just the day to day that I'm taking care of and that like my life is how I want it. I think she's not worried in that sense. And that's what I mean by peace is like you can see that and you can just tell by the way that like stress is like lifted off of them. And just how chill when I'm interacting with my mom now compared to like 10 years ago, just stress level wise, it's super cool to see. And I think that's just it goes back to just them like instilling things into us when we were younger that now we've taken those bits and we've built it and we've grown it into what it is today. And I think they just see that, right? Like they, again, not being a parent, but I think it'd be super cool to see like that you've done something for your children and now it's like reverse and you can watch it unfold, right? Like it's setting the building blocks and now you get to see the pieces come together. So Mother's Day is always an interesting day. It's always fun to celebrate and make sure that obviously we're showing appreciations for our moms. But,
absolutely. And I think speaking on that, that's a beautiful thing. And I think it needs to be acknowledged that you feel that your parents are at that point or your mom's at that point. Sorry. I have a strategic plan of how to get my mom there that I've shared with you.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry for those people who are watching this. I don't think I can share it until it comes into fruition. But I think as a son who's really committed to ensuring that gratitude is shown all the way through, and that includes anybody and everybody in our lives. We're really big on that, just making sure that we show thanks, and in the form of whether it be time or actions or whatever it is that we pay that all the way back, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have a plan that I think I can get my parents to that point. And they're both retired, but there's very specific things in their lifestyle that I think are holding them back from that piece. And this is a generational thing, right? That you really can't understand unless you've gone through it. And I want to make sure that I provide some context here. So we're both immigrants, right? You came from Germany. The joke is you're born in Stuttgart, you're born in a Porsche factory. I don't have, the more I get to know you, the less I think it is a joke. Yeah, and then I'm born in Birmingham in England, which for those who have watched Peaky Blinders is kind of where it's set. So those are my ancestors in an indirect, completely non-genetic way, but the culture is there. And being an immigrant coming to a new country, regardless of where you come from, whether it be England or India or China or Africa, wherever it is, it's hard. And the reason it's hard is you're going into an unknown culture, an unknown society, and generally the language is a little bit different, even if the subtleties are minor. Now, why that's important to reference is that there's trauma loaded with that. Not necessarily and exclusively on the children, but more on the parents. How good is your friends network here in Calgary?
Oh, that's pretty good.
Imagine leaving them all behind.
Yeah.
And then having to move to another country. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden your bank account has no money in it because it cost you everything that you had in order to be able to get there. And crazy. You don't know anybody in the place that you're going to. How would that feel?
I can't even put myself in those shoes. That's why when I reflect on that stuff, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So I think where I have to, this is where my strategic plan, and I'm almost approaching this in like a business case manner, but my dad is, in my mind, a legend. He, and I think I've shared this before, grew up in India. His house didn't have electricity in the village that he lived in until he was a teenager. It's one of the first houses that got electricity. And then in order to be able to provide for his family, he got a job as a bus conductor where I think he made like $20 a month equivalent, Canadian, for an entire family. And I'm not talking like one or two people. I'm talking like a lot of people on this one plot of land, right? And he was a bus conductor and somehow figured out a way to feed them, but never gave up. He's like, okay, this isn't going to be enough. So then he somehow got in touch with my mom, convinced her to bring him over to England, and they didn't even speak the same language. My mom's like pretty, she's pretty British, let's just put it that way, right? Didn't speak a lick of Punjabi, which is the language my dad speaks. And then they somehow fell in love. He convinced her then again to move to Canada because of all the social issues and things that were going on in England, and hearing my mother and hearing all the pain that she had experienced in England. He's like, this just isn't a good place. The stories I'm hearing, there's no positive ones. Let's get the heck out of here. And then moved us all to Canada. All of that can't just happen without pain. And I think what's happened is that the pain and the stress that caused my parents, they haven't had a healthy outlet. Like, they didn't have money to go to a psychologist. They didn't have the right kind of people in their lives that allowed them to be able to express this or reflect on these things, but they have me. And I've been given these opportunities in my life to be able to understand what a healthy relationship with yourself, as in your future self, your current self, and your past self is. And I'm looking at their lives and I'm like, I feel like I can help them. Now, the reality is, it might not work. But the real reality that I believe in is that I have to do something, because if I don't, I'll regret it. So hearing that to be honest with you, hearing that like your mom achieved that, yeah, I think I can do it.
Yeah, I think it's honestly what they want. I think you start to realize you have to understand what they want, right, out of it. Like, when do you think they're going to be happy? And I think the funny thing is, tying into your story, like my parents literally made the choice to move to Canada for my sister and I. Like, there was no other reason. There was nothing else, right? And I think it ties into what you're saying, because what was their goal with that, right? Like, there's obviously everything in life, you have a goal usually. When you're doing something, you have an outcome that you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
So if they were looking for an outcome that we would be healthy because of moving to Canada, that was their success. So the crazy thing is why I think that they're at peace is because they achieved that. So they didn't care if we became like the next Elon Musk or whatever it might be, or like Jeff Bezos, or like just change the world. That's not what they cared about. I think they cared about that we were healthy, and they achieved that by making that move, which is super crazy because you're saying, like, again, there's pain that comes with that. 100% there's pain that comes with that, right? Like, I can't even imagine, and I think even in today's age, it's easier to move different countries. I would say it's actually quite a bit easier because the world is more like transient and globalized, right? Like, I think it does become easier.
Yeah, fair point.
But yeah, like you look at that, whatever, 25 years ago and like what they did and the outcome that they wanted to achieve. So I think this is like, we look at it as like it's a burden on us almost, because we're like, hey, we got put this opportunity in front of us. We have to now do something that's like 10x that.
We like to also carry weight on our backs, right? Like,
for sure, but I think it's just like we've had this opportunity in front of us that we were given, whatever it was in life, that like this is the circumstance that we have, and we're very lucky. Or not lucky, that's a bad word for it, but like it's nice to be here, and I think that we utilize those things to like 10x that or whatever it is, and that's why I'm saying my parents probably don't even care about that. Like, they would care less if I was, as long as I'm doing something that like brings me fulfillment and joy, and that's why it's super cool to see. That's what I'm saying with that peace side. So
no, and I think
that's where it's weird. It's an interesting aspect. So it's cool that you want to build that for your parents. Like, if you want to. I think you should have an influence on that because, it's a huge part of their retirement, right?
Totally.
Their end days, so to say.
Totally. And in a functional sense, I'm the middle child, literally.
Yeah.
I have 2 sisters on side of me, and I'm very happy playing the middle child in a generational aspect because there's very few opportunities where you can see the entire valley from the top of the mountain, and I don't even necessarily even think we're anywhere near the top of the mountain. I think we're just at a good summit.
We're on like a dirt pile.
Yeah, we're on a dirt pile, and well, let's just say we're on a summit. I think it's a little bit more than a dirt pile down.
Not Mount Everest yet.
Yeah, not Mount Everest, but maybe we're a quarter of the way up. And we can see, and we go on a lot of hikes, right, for thinking. We'll do these meetings called same page meetings, and these are super effective. Typically, this time of the year is when they start to get a little bit more fun. And generally, what we'll do is we'll pick a mountain, and usually a pretty tough one, and we will spend the day from like 8 a.m. until like 6 p.m. usually with strategic goals. So we'll bring in major issues on the company side and major issues and major wins on the personal side. That's typically how we actually open it, is on the personal side.
Yep.
And then we pause and reflect and talk about next steps and things as a whole. And the one thing that I've noticed every single hike that we do, and I think why they're so enjoyable to do together, one, we put a pretty crazy pace on, and we're usually willing to run down the mountain, which is, we've fallen a couple times, but we always end up having fun. But we stop on the way up, and we take in the viewpoints, and we're like, oh, this is beautiful. And that way, by the time you get to the top, you're able to put all the pieces together, and then typically, we're kind of silly for this. Even on the drive home, or once we get home, we start sharing pictures with each other of that moment and kind of tie moments to it in relation to, oh yeah, this part was awesome because of X, Y, and Z, right? I find that that's where that same thinking applies to our lives, that we have to, at every stage, acknowledge what it is that's happened at that moment and why it's important. And once again, I just don't think our parents had that opportunity, right? Maybe they did reflect a lot, but they probably reflected under pressure where we don't have the same pressures as we do. And this entire generation as a whole don't have the same pressures that the previous generation does.
Different ones, yeah. I think it's just every generation deals with different things, right? Like, I think everyone's gonna have their struggles and their things, right? It's just different tools too, right? So, but I agree. I think our parents. The thing is, I think they just pushed through it, right? Because at the end of the day, they're like, we know this is what we need to achieve.
Yeah.
Which is probably why we also are like, I don't know. You like to use stubborn for the word, but I wouldn't say. I would say like relentless. Yeah. Like. Yeah. In the pursuit of what we want to do, because we just know it's possible. And I think, again, 99% of people fail because they give up. And I think that's one thing that we just aren't willing to do. And that goes back to the mother side, like 100%. That's, for me at least, that's my mom and my dad as well, but my mom is that.
Yeah, and we'll give our dads airtime on Father's Day.
No, for sure. Like, our dads are G's. Like, they've done some crazy stuff, but
they're both super cool guys. Yeah. Like, for what it's worth, like really, really good men. But the aspect of motherhood is a really interesting concept, but I still think the original inspiration for Zeno comes from them. So Zeno in itself is a company really focused on a few different things, right? The 1 million homes by 2040, making sure that we make this a great workplace to be. But what is it at its core? It's about, and almost saying this in like a manner that we know we're going to achieve this. We want to change the world, not from the perspective of, oh, we're just saying that. We want to change it from the environmental standpoint. It's like, hey, we need to be more responsible. We have to do a better job at taking care of the planet. And what does that all come back to? It might sound cheesy to some people, but it comes back to like Mother Earth, right? That function of everything that has to do with nurturing comes from the mother framework. And I think that's where we've been inspired by our mothers, but also knew that this was the natural connection point that would satisfy that aspect of that relationship. Is that though, like you said a few minutes ago, that you think that they would have been happy if we did anything, your mom and my mom, I know, are like super, super stoked on the path that we chose because they know that this is what they wanted to. Like both of our moms are extremely environmental, crazy when it comes to like how they care for like animals. Like the amount of times, and like my mom has seen a stray dog or animal, and like then all of a sudden I come home and it's in their house, and I was like, how did this happen? And sometimes the pets are not sometimes they're not even pets, but sometimes the animals are pretty cool. They're like, okay, I want to keep it. I want to keep it and take care of it. But this all still comes back to them, right? And the values that they instilled in us.
100%, yeah. I think it does. It's the animal one's always a funny aspect. Like you said, you get the house pets and growing up, but no, I think everything, the root of Zeno, or when we started Virtuoso at the time, like definitely ties into that, right? Like how do we actually do something with our life that creates a bigger impact, changes the world? As much as cliche as that change the world sounds, like that's definitely the roots, right? So.
Yeah, totally. And is it fair to say that our mothers are our inspiration?
Yeah, I think they're for sure.
Yeah, and then that led us to being motivated to do something about it, right? And then I think the motivation itself was to start the business. And then in order for the business to survive, because our original inspiration was so deep in our mothers, that the discipline came in. And that discipline was in a lot of different forms, right? Like what would you say, if you try to tie it back to your mom, are the discipline pieces that you were able to garner from her that you feel like you've applied to your day-to-day in the business or even in a general framework of things?
That's a good question. I would probably say, like, and this ties back to discipline, but like, always do what you say. So like, if you're gonna say something, you do it. I think that's a big thing that my mom always that I always saw in my mom. Show up, like. This isn't really a discipline side of things. I'm trying to think here. I would say being relentless is like, I guess, a discipline side, but I might have to think about this one.
Well, I guess
deeper. Yeah, like you give her on yours. I'm trying to think.
Well, I know your mom pretty well.
I'm just trying to think of like the key aspects though that I would utilize, like
the thirst, the never-ending pursuit for knowledge. Yeah, for sure, with your mom. Like your mom is really an individual that always wants to learn.
Yeah, that's true. She does. Yeah, I think just be better all the time. I think just is a big one. Like being better at who I am on a daily basis, and then I'm trying to think of how like working hard, but that's not a discipline side of things. I think it was just always consistent and show. One of the things that's funny is she was always like, as dumb as this, I almost think, but like prove them wrong. Like that was the thing that my mom always like. That was a big thing growing up. She would always be like, "It doesn't matter. One day you'll be able to do this and just prove whoever that said that wrong, right?" And I think that ties into discipline because you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're going through your different things. And I think routines. She definitely instilled routines in me and stuff like that. But yeah, what about you?
Yeah. Oh man, so many lessons that I've learned from my mom, and the inspiration's always there. The motivation to be able to satisfy that inspiration's there, but the discipline is an interesting one. 100% always show up. And with my mom, that meant at like any cost, whether it be, even if you're late, you still have to show up. And though it might be uncomfortable, you have to face the realities of the circumstances that you're in. That was number one. So always show up. That's not surprising, you know, that we have that similarity. The other one is like show up in the best version possible. So I know you know this about me, and actually I think you're the same as this as well too. I would never, even to date, I will not leave my house if there's a single wrinkle in a piece of my clothing or something looks out of place. So, you know, if that means going to bed a little bit early and waking up a little bit earlier for an important day, or making sure that I'm prepared the night before, putting out lunches and so on and so forth, like that preparation in order to show up to the world that, hey, I'm ready, and showing up as the best version of yourself is always the key. So always show up as the best version of yourself, and then give it your all. And what I mean by that is, like, my mom was never a person that would ever withhold opinions, and sometimes they would like hurt, and the other times they would be really eye-opening. And learning to listen to somebody like that is very difficult, because they're not trying to cause damage, they're trying to generate progress. And I only learned that over time. As a kid, I would always be like, man, my mom's always fussing over me, and like, you know, like, can't I just go and play? And even if it was like going and playing soccer, she's like, no, you still need to look, you know, a certain way. You're representing this family. You have to go and take a strong step out that door and know that you're carrying yourself with honor. And I think that's the last piece where that all kind of ties in, is just giving it your all and being honorable in everything that you do.
Yeah.
And my mom was never okay with doing anything that was unethical, like to a crazy degree. And I think that's why we're happy to put our faces out here. We're happy to have these conversations, because whether or not we did everything perfectly, we did it honestly. And we didn't cut any corners, and we've taken major L's in terms of financial losses, friends losses, staff losses, whatever it is. We've had to take those, and they hurt, but we did it because we knew at the end of the day what we were focused on and how we were trying to get there was done in an honest manner with the purest of intentions, which leads to our purpose, right? Is that we have all these layers of inspiration and motivation and discipline, and then purpose. And I think that's where our mothers always knew that there was a purpose out there for us. And that's probably the last piece that sits above all of this, is how many times when you were a kid did your mom know and always communicate to you that you were meant for something more?
All the time.
All crazy, right? Like, I think there were so many times where my mom probably used the word, like, to her, and I always think about, it's just my mom, she thinks I'm special. But the more you start accepting the reality of the love that they poured into us, I think you start realizing it's like, I only am like this because you allowed me to be. And maybe that's a good piece to talk about, is now that we've understand the framework of how our parents bring discipline and how the purpose is, do you feel like this is the purpose that your mom wanted for you? What were the life that we're living right now?
Yeah, it's hard to say want, because I feel like it's weird, because I don't think it was like ever, want for sure. I think, did she see it? Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why one of my skill sets is that, like, seeing far into the future on, like, and then like, seeing what the end vision is. I think I got that from my mom as well.
Yeah.
Because I think she could see all that. So even like during the different roadblocks and the different things in life that everyone I think goes through as a kid or whatever, is like there would always be that next step, and she could see that and be like, oh, this is just part of that journey. So yeah, 100%. I think it's definitely what they want, and I think it is the purpose of why we kind of are here today. Yeah. And why we get to do this as our job, and why we get to continue to kind of grow in this state and grow in the business. Did she realize that it would get to this point? I don't know, because I think that's the part that always is the
finer pieces.
And just the scalability of what Zeno has become, I think is always an interesting one for us and them at the same time. But
yeah, and same goes for me as well too. My mom would always talk about, and I'll get to the point here as to why this is important. My mom would always talk about these dreams. She would have her visions of like my life, and she would say the same thing forever. And she started saying this when I was a teenager. She's like, you're not going to be successful until you're 30. And you know, when you're 18, you're like, what? That's a lifetime away. Now that I'm older than 30, and you know, we're both sitting in that post-30 apocalyptic era, which is actually pretty awesome. Like, I don't really see the issue. I feel the same.
The best years of your life.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be. and so far, it's been pretty freaking awesome. Yeah. But she always hammered that home. That was that turning moment for me. And then lo and behold, it came around, and it actually happened. And I was like, man, like, okay. So I think, and I want to know your perspective on this, but the message that I want to send to everybody that's listening today is that just listen to your mom. Just listen to them. I know it's going to be tough sometimes, and the things that they're telling you aren't necessarily going to sit well with you, and it's because you don't understand it, but at least hold on to that thought of whatever it is that they said to you, because if you allow their voice to enter your ears, which will then eventually go through your mind and then hopefully reach your heart, it'll change your life. And it's because I always heard my mom in the back of my head that I think that I have become successful, and not necessarily in like the world frame of things, but just I'm successful that I know who I am and I know what I'm supposed to do. If I am broke tomorrow and I don't have anything around me that's of monetary value, it actually won't bother me at all. I'm completely cool with that. And it's because I've discovered like who I'm meant to be in this world, and I know how to satisfy that now.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think you realize later, I would say in your late 20s, you start to realize that the stuff your parents used to tell you is all very accurate. And they,
yeah,
like,
it's very, very true.
the wisdom comes, like there's a reason they provide that wisdom to you. But yeah, I like it 100% that there's one saying, like literally, prove them wrong was literally the saying I would hear from my mom say to me all the time, right? In my head when like things would get hard. So it's, yeah, hands down. That was the one thing, is like listen to what they have to say, because they probably know you very well. And they know your skill sets very well, and they know when to push and pull and when to be. I think one of the cool things, actually, just to touch on them, to see is they know when to like be loving and when to be harder on you, which is super interesting too. And like what you need in certain moments. So
yeah,
but yeah, 100%.
And I mean, I'm biased.
Yeah.
Regardless of life circumstances, I think everybody should have children. Though that's not something that I fully understand. I'm sitting on one side of the coin, right? So obviously that comes with a major grain of salt. But building off of that idea, when you're a parent, not only do you start to learn more about yourself, you start to realize how much you are like your parents, but then you also start to understand the human experience of like how crazy being raised actually is. And to give you a frame of point, one of our kids, and I have three, two are identical twins, they're all amazing children, is really fussy in the mornings. And ironically enough, he's the one that's most like me. So he's super fussy in the mornings, and I quietly watched for like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and just every morning, I'd see him go through the same thing. And then knowing his personality and knowing that he is much more of his environment. So what I mean by that is like the forces in his environment affect his feelings much more. I realized that if he's actually the last one that wakes up and is the last person that hits the table, and his mom is sitting there with him, it all goes away. So one change like that, by just observing and being able to see them from like a pure manner where there's nothing but pure emotions and pure communication from these children, because they haven't been tarnished by the world in the sense of like what we have to deal with as adults that form us into who we are, that I get them at face value. I was really easy to quickly able to change the environment, adjust it so that there was success, and then allow them to be able to flourish and enjoy their mornings more. And that's a role that I really enjoy playing, of just sitting back and watching and then strategically moving things around in order for success to happen. And I think that's probably the most magical part about being a parent, is that these things that you're talking about that you've learned from your parents and the experiences that you've applied yourself, there's the next stage to that. And that stage, the one that I'm experiencing, from my opinion, is the funnest. Because then you get to start like taking all these lessons that you've learned and start looking at the landscape of things, and you get to start painting your own picture, right? And that's why I'm so strong on that statement, that I think that people should have children, is because you're missing out on possibly the most beautiful part of life and what it has to offer, right? Is the fruition of bringing more into this world. And I think the planet's in good hands. There's a lot of people like us now doing these things. And Gen Z, in my opinion, though they get hammered by the general thinking, I think they're on an amazing path. I think they're going to push the paradigm. I think they're going to do better than us. And why wouldn't they? That's what we've been building, right? We want them to have a better future for us. So I'm really stoked on what this next generation and the generation after that is going to do.
Yeah, kids side of things one day.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think you get to utilize the lessons. Like it's yeah. It's like anything in life. Even when it's going back to like even starting the business, right? You get to utilize things that you learned and test them right on your own terms. Yeah. Which I think is the cool thing about having a business, being a parent, whatever, you get to actually do those things on your own terms with your own game, so to say.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you can use the word game.
Yeah,
Sometimes
like
that's
you're
not-
literally like you're at the end of the day, you're just playing a different game, right? Yeah, life, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We even have like core values
Yeah,
in our household that Jan and I are refining in terms of like how do we actually communicate to them consistently,
Yeah.
and like really show up as our best versions, right? And
100%.
yeah, fundamentally it is a version of a game at the end of the day. I got one more question before we talk about
Surge.
the surge here. You're at a different stage in life than I am, and you're much more aware of this stage than I am at because you lived in this stage longer than I have, right? I had my first kid when I was 29. Is that right? I'm terrible with years.
29.
What does it take at this stage to be a good son? What do you think is required at this stage to be a good son?
Like to my parents? Like
Yeah.
for me?
Yeah.
Oh, honestly, just make their life easy. I think the biggest thing, and I mentioned like when they're at peace, right? Like earlier, I think it's time. So putting more time towards spending with them. I know there's all those statistics, right, on like how much time you actually spend after you turn 18, how much time you spend with your families. Like,
It's so sad.
like a few days.
Oh
Like
my
it's actually
God,
crazy.
It's sad to see those numbers.
And I think that's a big thing that hits me at this age is like,
Yeah.
the more time I can spend with them and just quality time and even with the piece that we are in the business is like actually spending time with them, not being on my phone answering emails and like taking phone calls, like just going and spending quality time with them is a big thing. I think that's something that will make them happy and that would allow me to be a good son to them. One day I think just being able to alleviate any of the stresses they have, and I don't think we're at a point for that yet, but if there's anything that stresses they have or situations that they've had to put themselves into for me to get to where I am, being able to alleviate those. And then other than that, like, yeah, I think it's just understanding them better. One thing I want to start doing as well is like really digging into who my parents are and like how they came to be who they are and like the different things that they dealt with, because I think that generation, and again, I'm German, so this is a little bit different for me, but they're not very, the generations tie into, but Germans are not known for being like open about their emotions with each other and like tying into.
I think that's known globally.
Yeah. Like I think that's like when you say I love you in German, it's the most like blunt, shitty sounding thing ever.
Let's see it.
So like you say ich liebe dich, like that doesn't sound like you're like. It just sounds like I don't know how it sounds to you. But
Say it one more time.
Ich liebe dich. Like it just sounds like I don't know. It is what it is, but
and German, I've heard it spoken by a few people now. It's a beautiful language.
It can be.
It can be very, very beautiful.
It depends.
Yeah, it depends. But the majority of the time when it's translated in English, it's it's very blunt. Blunt is a good word.
Yeah. So I think that's a big thing for me is like being able to understand them more. And I think switching the script on like, hey, you don't have to put up these walls or be these certain things anymore. Because I think that was a big thing growing up is they showed us like 20% of what was going on and like 80% behind the background that they were dealing with. I would never know.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing about why I think they were such amazing parents. But now it's like, okay, well, what was that 80%? Like, what were those things? Because those just become life lessons that I can utilize.
Yeah.
Whether it's for kids later on, whatever, just throughout my whole life or helping other individuals towards my goal of the 1 billion lives, right? Like those are the things. So I think that's where the son side of stuff comes in. But what about? Well, I guess yours is gonna be different because yours like.
Well, I try to cheat. I try to cheat my way
things,
through life as much as possible in terms of gaining knowledge from other people to apply it to myself. And the first time I met your parents, like literally the first time, we were like for lunch somewhere, and I asked them, "How did you raise him? What did you do? I love Kai, and I think he's an excellent person. I need the formula." And that was probably the first time you heard a lot of that stuff, right? And I think every time I meet them, I do that.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, I need to know. Like, Kai did this, and do you guys know where this came from? And sometimes I have the conversations without you being there. And I was like, I end up learning a lot about you. And it's partially selfish, partially my responsibility to you, right?
Yeah.
I think that we've made this agreement amongst ourselves, and this is with anybody else in my life, that if you can make it through the terror of being my friend, that the upside is that I'll take care of you no matter what. And when I use the word terror, it's just that I'm usually very direct and very purpose driven at all times. And it can be very intense for some people, but those who make it through that process, I will love with my entire heart. And I need to be able to do that because I know how fragile my being is when I open myself to people. So getting through that door is generally a very, very hard process, right? And I think you talked about this in our previous conversation, is that you're very trusting on the front end, but once that's broken, it's very hard to recuperate. Whereas I need people to build trust up to a certain point, right? So I think that's where being a good son at my stage is about that.
Yep.
Is I actually don't think my parents fully trust me yet. And I need them to be able to, I need to get to that point where they do. And then once that's satisfied, I achieve the goal of what I'm looking for in order to provide them, as you said, peace. So I'm climbing that cliff of earning their trust because I degraded it, right? Of doing a lot of stupid stuff as a young person where they loved me wholeheartedly. And then I started becoming my own person. And as part of that, I broke them down. And then now it's the rebuilding of who they are as people to get them to a point in life where they can feel that they're free of that burden and then living their best life. Because I think it is achievable. And I think as a child, every single child looks at it as, oh, well, they're my parents, like they're the ones that chose to have us, but they didn't choose to have a child that would just destroy their life. Every parent has a child, the majority of parents, have a child with the intention of that child bringing joy to their life and them simultaneously providing that in return. So I think that's where I'm at right now is I don't know what it looks like to be a good son because I feel like I'm still trying to understand what needs to be done in order to be able to make that come to life because I've had so many priorities in my life. I kind of backburned my parents for a long period of time and now I'm at a stage where I don't feel like that's appropriate anymore and I need to bring that very forefront to my responsibilities and priorities.
Yeah, 100%. That's makes sense.
Yeah. So
I was gonna say, I think talk a little bit about Surge.
Yeah.
'Cause it's obviously a big, exciting thing.
Yeah, how sweet is this sweater, by the way?
It's sick.
Their logo's
Sweet,
their logo's deadly. I love it, and I'm super excited about what's happening here. So today's the 15th, right? And Surge's first game kicks off on the 28th. Or 27th. 27th. So it's a Saturday. It's here in Calgary at Winsport. And why I wore this sweater today was one, it was Mother's Day and yesterday, and I had an opportunity to really think about like all the things I was grateful for. And this is one of the relationships that I know both you and I are absolutely stoked on. And ironically enough, Jason announced yesterday that he's having another kid. And he announced that publicly. If you guys follow him on social, take a look at it. But if you haven't, it's a beautiful picture. And his son, he has some awesome flow. Yeah, I'm jealous of that kid's hair. And it was a beautiful moment, right? And we had a chance to speak with Jason even prior to that post loosely about this. And then had a chance to speak to him last night really briefly as well too, just to congratulate him further. And this is what the Surge is all about, right? It's the 4 quadrants of Calgary, right? So northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, right? Calgary's broken up into this nice quadrant system, makes it nice and easy. And really good for future expansion as the city continues to grow. But we believe that this relationship is going to be part of that growth. Surge to us means community. It ties beautifully into what the company's doing. Obviously, we have strides for sustainability with the marathon piece, city cleanup, bring awareness to, we can actually be better. And then the real community tie-in in regards to reaching out to individuals who can't afford solar, who don't necessarily know anything other than what's going on in their day-to-day life. So like sports is really big for kids. Education is really big for kids. This is all about that, right? And why I'm so excited about the 27th is it finally comes to life. Like this has been in the works for so long now. And Jason has been so patient with us and been so kind throughout the entire process, as has the rest of the Surge team, for us learning what does it look like to actually be a good title sponsor. And just a proud moment, sole title sponsor of the Surge. You'll be able to be seeing Zeno on the jerseys. It was, one of those things I wouldn't say it was hard earned, but it was just life kind of lining up as it should, right? And that's where I'm really excited about this upcoming thing. And the game's going to be unreal. Yeah. Sports in general, fans, from what I understood, should be watching this. If you like competition, fast-paced sports, and it's supposed to be faster paced than the NBA, and NBA is already pretty quick. And there's going to be a lot of amazing live music. And there's a lot of people already committed to the actual first game and quite a few of the games after that with season ticket holders and whatnot. It's going to be pretty electric. And I think it's going to be that next stage of Calgary's evolution, right? Is that we have an amazing hockey team. We have a variety of other things constantly going on in this sport. This is going to be the next big thing. This is going to be the piece that pushes Calgary further into its identity that's boiling beneath the surface that nobody really knows about, which is about our diversity as a city and all of the skill and talents that we have outside of the framework that's gotten to the city to this point. So, this is what I want to talk about, why I wore this sweater today, but I don't want to hog all the airspace. What is it that you're excited about with this relationship that I haven't mentioned? And
I was just gonna say,
sorry if I took the air out of the room there.
Yeah, I think everything that you mentioned, just even what Winsport means to like myself growing up here in Calgary.
Oh yeah,
like,
that's a cool story.
Winsport was like that place where you could go when you could go to the summer camps. There was like mountain biking, there was like indoor gym stuff. I remember actually playing. It wasn't that exact gym, but there's gyms at Winsport where you do like, I don't even know, like summer camps and stuff, right? Which is super cool that we're going to be literally sitting in there and our company name's going to be on the floor there. So that's a big part of it. I think a big part is going to be, funny enough, ties back to our parents, like having people in our life that are very important be there for that day as well. And then you pretty much mentioned everything. Like the Surge is just, it brings together what Zeno is with another organization that's just going to bring that next level of, we'll call it entertainment, to Calgary. I think it's going to bring a level of entertainment that Calgary hasn't seen before. I think it's something where basketball, I would personally say, does the best job out of all the sports for this, is just bringing people together. It's not even that much. The sport is amazing and it's about the sport, but it's about the people. It's about the atmosphere. It's about what's actually happening in that arena. What's the purpose? What are the people that are sitting courtside, right? Like it's such a cool place where like every walk of earth will be able to kind of like be integrated into. And what you're saying with the 4 quadrants, how they did that is really, really cool, because it's something that brings Calgary together. There's going to be a big thing where the divide on the monetary side is not as big as well, which is nice. Like you can come to the game for like $25 to $30. So like show another sport that's professional where you can do that, right? In Calgary you can't. So that part's really cool. I'm excited about that, just to see that place like just buzzing. I know that this week, I messed up the dates earlier. This week, they have the season ticket holder event as well.
Oh yeah,
which will be super cool.
That's an exclusive event.
So that'll be an exclusive event that's really, really cool.
I think there's like 200, 300 people coming, and it's at National.
Yeah, and just to see the people that are going to be involved in that, meet some of the players. I know there's been a lot of hype around the individuals that are coming to Calgary. I think it's going to be.
You've seen the lineup?
Yeah, it's going to be really cool just to see those individuals, and then again, I think it's just it's the excitement of the first season and how Zeno ties into being like the inaugural season of a team in Calgary, and we're allowed to be side by side with that. I think that's the part that's just, it's almost like hard to wrap your head around.
We're really putting our stake in the ground kind of thing, right? It's like, hey, we're on the moon, put the flag down kind of thing.
Yeah. So,
but
the exciting
not as
things,
consequential.
Like,
this is Calgary, but to us, I think it's that important.
Yeah. So I think, and then the other part is, obviously, we can put a plug out. Jason will be on the podcast for episode number 3. So that was really awesome that you brought that together and that he's going to be available for that. So super excited about that, and being able to have him just give more insight about Surge, what that means for our friendship, and obviously our business relationship, and what it means to Calgary. The guy knows what he's talking about, and the guy knows how to bring the community together. So excited to have him on as well.
Yeah, really excited to hear his story. And no, thanks for your perspective. Like, thanks for your perspective on everything today. I think one thing that you and I get to show a lot of to each other off camera is gratitude. But yeah, even today, just listening to everything that you've said has been able to make me a better person. So just want to say thank you.
Of course, thank you too, man. It's always fun.
Always, man. Let's cap it there. So this is another episode of the Lead the Charge podcast with Kai and Gersh of Zeno Renewables. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this listen, and stay tuned in because there's a lot of awesome stuff coming down the pipeline.